Hey everybody, this is Chris with Overclockersclub. I've got something really cool here from MSI. So this is the new MSI Spatium M480 Play, compatible with PlayStation 5. It is a PCIe 4.0 capable NVMe M.2, 2 terabyte, 7,000 read speeds, I should say, up to 7,000 megabytes a second, which is absolutely screaming fast. So there's not really much here on the box as far as specifications, so let's see what I can find on the website. So the Spatium actually has different levels of performance, and they use different controllers, and what you get are different price points based on the level of performance. So the 480 is at the top of the list, and the 480 actually comes in a few different flavors just by itself, meaning that you get this version that we're looking at today that is really geared towards being used in a PS5 or PlayStation, which I don't actually have a PlayStation, but it'll perform just the same. There really isn't anything special about it other than the heatsink is designed to fit in a PlayStation 5. That's the claim to fame there, because there is also a Spatium in the middle here that has a larger heatsink that can be used on a PC that doesn't have any restrictions for a large heatsink. Then there's just a bare Spatium M480 that basically just doesn't have a heatsink, and you can use that on a motherboard with whatever heatsink you want to use. So those are your basic differences, and again, you've got different levels of performance, and your cost varies with those levels. And that brings me over to the next page here, the next slide, which is the specifications. And these are just for this particular Spatium M480. And this is really the Play. So the difference again being the heatsink that is set up just for the PS5. And the specifications show that we've got 4 different capacities. You've got a 500 gigabyte, 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, and a 4 terabyte. And we're looking at the 2 terabyte unit today. They all use the same controller. When you start looking at the specs, you can see the read and write speeds are a little better for the higher capacity units, with the 2 and 4 terabyte units having the same read and write. The only real difference is when you keep going down to the terabytes written, TBW, which is sort of a measure of the life expectancy of the drive. The larger the drive, the longer the life expectancy, because you've got more basically more real estate to write the data over time versus a smaller capacity unit that will be writing over the same space over and over its lifetime. So that's the specification list, and moving on to the next one, the next slide here, the features. So you've got a 5-year warranty, the security and reliability. You've got, let's see, blazing speeds, which we already know with a PCIe Gen 4 interface. MSI Center, so you can sort of integrate this with the software package for your MSI system. It's PS5 compatible. The heatsink is sized so that it will work optimally in a PlayStation, which is good. It's got 3D NAND flash, so you've got some good density in a small design, all the way up to 4 terabytes. And those specifications are really amazing. Now we'll be testing it here on this motherboard. This is a new one here from MSI. This is the Tomahawk Z690, and they actually make this in 2 flavors. There's a Z690 DDR4 board, which is what this one is, and I'll post a link to the review there in the description. And there's also a DDR5 version, but this one is the DDR4 version, and we've got some cool memory here that we'll be testing in a separate review. This is some nice DDR4 memory from Neo Forza. This is like 128 gigabytes of memory. So we'll look at that in a separate review. But back to the drives here. So what I find interesting is, years ago, if you recall, the 3.5-inch drives were the standard drives for years and years and years. And it was really cool when we finally broke the terabyte milestone on storage capacity. But if you know these, most people, the standard drives here, these things were slow and clunky unless you really spent money on the higher end drives. But Then these came out. These are your 2.5-inch SSDs. Roughly 10 years ago, these came on the scene, and they were a real game changer. Now, the first few years they were out, the capacities were very low. The cost was very, very high compared to the storage capacity you could get on the old 3.5-inch drives. But the speeds were very impressive starting out, and then over time they've gotten faster. But they've maxed out now around 550 megabytes a second read and write. That's the upper limit that you'll find on these. They're still great drives. The costs have come down. You get a lot of bang for the buck, and they really wake up an older, slower system, especially an old laptop. You can really breathe new life into it. But here in the last few years, we've got the new form factor, the NVMe, and this plugs into your M.2 sockets on your motherboards, and most motherboards today, and a lot of laptops, are coming with those from the factory. And let me zoom in here on the motherboard. I'll have to reposition my camera. There, that's a little better. So, like I said, most motherboards today have at least one NVMe slot, one M.2 slot, and it's not unusual to see multiple slots on your motherboards, especially on a full-size ATX motherboard. So this particular one, we've got one here. This is where my operating system drive is currently located. And there's another one here under, actually, this heat shield here, this heat sink. It's labeled 02, 01, 02, and I believe there is one underneath, at least one underneath this graphics card. But like I said, it's not unusual to see multiple slots, which makes it very nice. You can have everything right here on your motherboard, and you don't even need to use any of your SATA ports. Actually, I had to go and grab the motherboard box here. I couldn't remember for sure what was underneath that slot there where the graphics card is. And actually, there are two M.2 slots under there. There's position 3 and position 4. Now, you'll want to look at whatever motherboard you have, and it varies by chipset, varies by the age of the motherboard, but often the first or second slot are usually your faster slots. They're closest to the CPU. This is not always the case. That's why I say check the specifications with your particular motherboard. And then because of bandwidth sharing and limitations, again, depends on the chipset, but the slots that are further away from the CPU, the furthest away from the CPU, will sometimes be the slower slots. Now, they're still screaming fast by today's standards, but your fastest ones are usually either the first one or the first and second. Again, check out your own specifications to verify that. So what I'll do now is we'll get this thing out of the box. All right, time to get it out of the box. Oh, very nice. Okay, right away. Caution. Disassembling metal heatsink may damage the product. And even finer print there, that's hard to see. Remove sticker before playing. It's hard to read. Yeah, playing. Okay. Well, that's fine. So I guess they're saying resist the urge to remove the heatsink. So we will do that. Now, normally when I'm handling stuff like this, I wear my electrostatic discharge wrist strap here, but it is extremely humid and hot out here where I am now, so the risk for static discharge is pretty minimal. Plus everything here on my table, workbench, it's all grounded, so I'm not too concerned. But in the winter, when there's a lot of static and the air is dry, you definitely want to take the proper precautions. Okay, so has a little, I'm going to assume this is a little warranty or instruction manual. Let's see what it says. It says MSI Spatium solid state drive. Okay, legal disclaimer, installation guide. It says SSD, 2.5-inch SSD bracket and M.2 screws are not included in this package, so you want to make sure you have the right screws. Usually any more that comes with the motherboard. Multiple languages. Let's see, before installation. Okay, so this is all pretty straightforward. Yeah, put it in the slot, install the screw. Of course, you want to make sure everything is powered off before you before you do anything, but all right, let's take a closer look. And I'll go ahead and peel this off. Now, I think the reason they make that comment is sometimes on the motherboards, you know, they have the integrated heatsink on the motherboard, but it's sort of relying on, or it's assuming or expecting just a flat solid-state drive with no heatsink. And I'll show you what one of those looks like here in a moment. But first, we'll look at this a little more closely. So it has a nice heatsink on there. We've got the sort of grooved there that increases the surface area. There's a little MSI badge. Looks very nice. On the back side, there's not much there to see. There are 4 screws that hold the heatsink on, which you can see there. All right, so the system is shut down. I loosened the 2 screws there. Now, I'm not 100% sure just yet, but I may not be able to use this heatsink that comes with the motherboard because of the thickness of the included heatsink on the drive, which is no big deal. So now I need to go and find the screw, let's see, in the motherboard box to secure the drive there. So there's the mounting stud there that I'll be using. All right, I found the little screw there in the motherboard box for the solid-state drive. Now, like I said earlier, always make sure you power off your system and kill the power to the power supply, because no matter how steady you think your hand is, that just sort of plugs in and drops down. No matter how steady you think your hand is, it is so easy to drop a screw or whatever right on your motherboard, and that's usually not good. So get that screw started. And of course, anytime you're using a tool around your motherboard, be very careful. You don't want to push down too hard. The screwdriver slips off and then you go scraping it across your motherboard. Okay, so that appears to be pretty secure. And like I thought, you can't really, well, I say that, let's see. Yeah, this isn't really meant to be used together. Yeah, that's not really an option there. Looks like it would fit, but it's up there way too high. So, which is what I figured. All right, so now I'll fire this up, and then we'll see if it recognizes the drive, which it should. There's no reason why it wouldn't. And then we'll look at the thermal profile on this. I've got a infrared camera, so we'll look at it at idle, and then we'll put a load on it and see if the temperatures go up. Now, I know for a while there I was hearing lots of stories about people having issues with these M.2 drives really getting hot, and from my own experience, I can say that a case fan or a series of case fans that are moving air through your case, any airflow you can get to move across your M.2 drive here makes a huge difference in the thermals. Now, usually when they're at idle, there's not a lot of heat, but if you're moving a lot of data back and forth, I've seen these, they can get a little toasty, but we'll look at all that here in just a little bit. All right, so everything is powering up. All right, so I got to backpedal a little bit here. So apparently my video was not recording, so I'll sort of start over. So when I plugged the drive in, fired the system up, File Explorer here did not recognize the drive. So first thing I did is you come down here and you right click on your little Windows icon. Now this is Windows 11. So I went over to Device Manager first, and I looked at disk drives up here, and it did recognize it. It showed that it was, the system did see it, which was good. So we close that, and we come back down here to Disk Management. And the drive, it shows up here because it's already formatted, but it was not initialized. It just had to be initialized. So after you initialize it, and you'll see that here in the next video, that one did record. But then you format it and it shows up here on your file explorer. So there it is. It's just an empty drive. So the disk management is showing this one is unallocated, so we'll go ahead, do a new simple volume, assign the drive letter D, that's fine, and TFS is fine. Quick format, and there it is, just an empty drive, nothing on it. So the next thing I'll do is get the thermal camera and we'll look at it at idle with nothing going on and no air really moving across it. I turned off the fans here on the graphics card, and we'll see what it looks like, and then I'll stress test it and see what the thermals look like, and then we'll turn the fan on here and see what effect having some air moving across has on the drive. And the thermal camera here shows the drive in the mid to upper 40s. That's degrees Celsius, of course. And this is idle with no air blowing across. You can see the fan there on the graphics card is not running. And then the temperature here, this is the heat sink over the chipset. It's pretty warm. In fact, I would have expected it to be a little cooler at idle with not really much going on. Although, I do have the 128 gig of RAM. That's 264 gig kits sitting there in the memory slots. Anyway though, this is what it looks like at idle. So what I'll do is put a stress test on it, see what that does to the temperature with the fan off, and then we'll turn the fan, at least on the graphics card, on and see what that does to the temperature here across the heatsink. And over here using AIDA64, I'm checking out the drive temperature from the internal sensors, and it looks like we're right at about 43°C, which is pretty close to what I was showing on the heatsink, just a little lower, but that's fine. And now I've got the fans on a little over 50% on the graphics card. So we've got some air circulating, and you can see we knocked it down a couple of degrees there. Same thing on the chipset there. It's a little bit cooler. And AIDA64 is showing, let's see, 35 Celsius. So it knocked a little bit of temperature off there. And that's just a little bit of air here that's flowing from the fans on the graphics card. Now your case fans, of course, ideally would move air across the heatsink though. But this shows you that the importance of airflow, how it can make a difference, even a small amount. Okay, so I realized I did not let this sit idle long enough for the temperatures to stabilize, and it actually dropped a fair amount more. And if we look at the temperature right there, we are sitting at about 30 degrees Celsius on the drive when it is at idle with some air moving across it. So what I'll do now is put a little stress on it. We'll go ahead and fire up this Atto disk benchmarking application here, and it's stressing the drive, and we will look at the temperature here. We'll come back in a moment when the test is closer to the end, and we'll see what that does to the overall temperature. So you can see it's already gone up about a degree right there. So now we're getting close to the end of the test. You can see that we have pretty much maxed out on our read and write speeds, and our temperature has gone up to 41 degrees Celsius. And we're almost done with the testing. Another few seconds here, and should be one more round. And again, we've pretty much maxed out, and we're just a little under 7,000 on the read and write. So there we are. And it looks like we got up to about 42 degrees Celsius. And again, there's our performance. All right, so what really matters? At the end of the day, people always want to know, what are the read and write speeds? How does it perform? And you can see here I've used 3 little software benchmarking tools, and there are others out there, but these are the 3 that I commonly use to give you an idea of what the read and write speeds are from a benchmark perspective. And your advertised read and write speeds, again, those are best case laboratory testing, theoretical speeds. Typically you'll come in just a tad under that, which is pretty normal, and that's what I see here in my testing. So from my experience, this thing is screaming fast. You've got your PCIe 4.0 interface on the motherboard that I'm using. To get the most bang for your buck, you'll want to use the latest and greatest platform that takes advantage of the PCIe 4.0 speed capabilities. And of course, the next question people will ask is, how much does this thing cost? Well, right now on Amazon, the list price was $359 for the 2 terabyte model. Right now, and again, it varies from day to day, but right now it's showing $229 for a 2 terabyte unit. And the 1 terabyte unit right now is showing on sale. List was $199, it's showing up for $129. I think that's a really good deal. So I would give this the Overclockers Club Editor's Choice Award. This is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.